Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and one of the things that starts to separate newer players from their more experienced counterparts is the understanding and use of combat tricks. Because of course, winning more combats leads pretty directly to winning more games, and of course, that means you are, more often than not, gathering resources on Arena more efficiently. So today we're going to be talking about the standard legal combat tricks that are presented as part of your starter collection. But before we get into all that, take just a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, because that kind of thing really keeps this boat moving. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Starting things off with white, we actually get a couple of good solid combat tricks. The first one that I want to call attention to is Claws Out. This one not only gets cheaper when you run it in something like your Cats or Life Gain deck, but it pumps your entire team, which makes it a little bit of an overrun in its own right, but the fact that it is instant speed and you can cast it mid-combat in response to your opponent blocking and thinking they're going to kill some of your pieces, or potentially even better, to declaring no blocks and they lose the game out of nowhere. Again, it is kind of an overrun in its own right, but I obviously have to include this in any conversation about combat tricks. They give you 4 copies of this in your starter collection, so you are good to go and solid on this. And this is a card you will get a lot of play out of, and learning to time it correctly will win you games. Now, the real skill check here is the 2 copies of A Moment of Triumph. Again, instant speed, so it is solidly in the camp of a combat trick, giving a target creature +2/+2 until end of turn. But the real bonus here is you gain 2 life. So in any of your Life Gain Matters decks, this is going to trigger a bunch of additional on-board triggers. So not only should you win the combat of the target A Moment of Triumph, but you should get some other incidental benefits within those Life Gain Matters decks. I really think 2 copies is the right number here. I don't think you want to go on overboard on this, but it's also a clue for other potential instant speed effects like, say, removal, that also give you life gain triggers to get those on-board effects going as well. Really solid card here that can't be understated for a Life Gain Matters deck, particularly for newer and budget players. As we move into blue, you'll find that it is a little thinner for combat tricks. It's not really the blue mage's expertise. They're more about counters and things of that sort. But we do have Dive Down, which could save a creature mid-combat. But more often than not, you're going to want to use this to gain hexproof until end of turn, i.e. saving your creature from a non-damage destroy, removal, exile effect. Because of course, once your creature gains hexproof, it's no longer a valid target for said removal piece. The other important one here is Fey Bloom Trick. Although, again, it's a little outside of my definition of a combat trick, because ideally you want to cast this as your opponent moves to combat, tapping down one of the creatures that they want to swing with, and potentially ruining the entire math for that combat, and maybe they don't swing at all. And in addition to tapping down one of their creatures, you get to bring 2 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying into play on your side. Again, you can do that mid-combat to gain the fairies and maybe win some combats or have some unexpected blockers or something like that. But giving down the tap down effect is really a large part of the 3 mana that you're paying for here. And I don't necessarily recommend its use, without a very specific reason. Additionally, I really think blue is the right place to talk about permanents with flash as combat tricks, because of course you can cast these outside of your normal main phase. That's what flash does for you. So you can drop in one of these creatures as an unexpected blocker very, very easily. Your starter collection gives you multiple copies of Spectral Sailor, which also has flying and onboard card draw. Briarborn Cutthroat, which in addition to being a 2/1 for 2 mana, will also reward you for casting other things during your opponent's turn. So ideally, you drop in your Cutthroat first and then play an additional end of turn effect, or maybe with your 3rd mana, drop a Spectral Sailor and pump up your Cutthroat. And of course, one of the rares in your starter collection is the High Fae Trickster, a 4 mana 4/2 with flying that gives all of your spells flash, i.e. all of your creatures in that deck now are potential combat tricks. As we discuss black, keep in mind it is very much more known for instant speed removal. And in fact, your starter collection makes that pretty darn apparent with cards like Stab, Moment of Craving, which also is a life gain trigger, Tribute to Hunger, Hero's Downfall, Mortify for that Azorius deck, and of course Bake Into a Pie, all being very solid removal pieces. We also have Undying Malice that is technically a combat trick that won't necessarily help you win a combat, but will save a creature from either a removal piece or simply bring that creature back into play in response to the combat resolution or a removal piece. The one real combat trick in my mind when it comes to black is Fake Your Own Death. For 2 mana at instant speed, you get a +2/+0 bonus to the targeted creature, and just like Undying Malice, it will return to the battlefield when it otherwise would have died. And it brings along with it a treasure token, giving you a little bit of short-term ramp or color fixing. Unfortunately, this is really the only combat trick in black, but learning to use this effectively to win a combat and not give up your creature is very, very good. And of course, what you want to be targeting with this are creatures that have enters the battlefield effects and will bring additional value back with it. Much like the black portion of your starter collection, red is primarily known for removal. But rather than this being destroy effects, these tend to be damage effects, like Burst Lightning, Abrade, Scorching Dragonfire, and Fiery Annihilation gives you over 10 damage-based pieces of removal just to get you started. Now, Bulk Up is technically a combat trick that either allows you to win a combat by effectively gaining more power to kill your opponent's creature, but it doesn't do anything to save your creature either. Very red in that manner. The piece that I think is far more interesting is actually Goblin Surprise, a 3 mana instant that can create 2 1/1 red goblin creatures that can either be surprise blockers or EOT creatures that will effectively have haste when things move to your turn. But much like Claws Out, the real beauty of Goblin Surprise, or the surprise if you will, is its ability to instant speed give creatures you control +2/+0 to either knock out those blockers that your opponent thought was going to be safe, or take a big chunk of their life total if they didn't block enough creatures. Those are the kinds of surprises that Goblin decks love to have in their hand. And of course, that brings us to green, our final stop on our combat trick tour. And we encounter none other than the absolute classic Giant Growth. This is one of the original Magic cards, one of the few that still sees print and play around since Alpha. And of course, it's a classic for a reason. For a single green, target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. This is the very definition of combat trick in order to win your individual combat. It just doesn't get much more basic than this. Now, the other more potentially challenging and skill piece here is Snakeskin Veil. And although this is an uncommon, it does see print now as a common on Arena, which means you can craft it as a common. For, again, a single green at instant speed, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, as opposed to something like Giant Growth that was a temporary boost. Now, rather than just the counter, this also gives the target creature hexproof until end of turn. And just like we talked about earlier, this spell may be best used in order to foil your opponent's removal, but is a nice way to opponent's end of turn pump up a relevant creature using mana that would have gone to waste otherwise, or potentially to add that counter to an unblocked creature and finish the game when they think they're going to stabilize at 1 and then kill you on the swing back. So there it is, guys. My thoughts on all the tricks that everyone starts with on Arena. So get out there and practice their use and try and predict what tricks your opponents may have so you can win even more combats. Before we go, I want to give a shout out to some of the superheroes in my life. That's right, my supporting patrons. And if you would like to be a superhero around the Stronghold, stop by and check it out. You never know what you're missing. And of course, we have some other suggestions on how you can flex your superpowers.